Hello, everyone, and welcome in. My name is Bryce Koon, and we are getting ready to be live here on the Crowded Booth. Little issue over on X/Twitter. Elon Musk makes you have a premium account to live stream on Twitter now, so we don't have that. So we're not going to have the views that we had normally. But hey, that's okay. We've got a lot of people listening after the fact as we kind of ramp up our live shows once again. Hey, we're happy you're here with us. Will Menace is joining me here in just a second. We get ready to talk about the big trap games in the SEC. We're going to go through every single team, and we're going to give a trap game. And I've already seen Will and I have some different ones. Should be great conversation. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, and we will see you here in just a second on the Crowded Booth.
Pile in here and make yourself feel at home. The Crowded Booth is coming on. The Crowded Booth with Bryce Koon.
Well, welcome in, everybody. How we doing? Will, I'm just disappointed that I didn't know about Twitter/X before we started this. We have a lot of people who watch over on those platforms, but I guess it is what it is. We'll have to pay to get the blue check mark now.
Yeah, that's new. I didn't know about that at all. Interesting.
It is what it is, and this is what you get to when you don't have Ralph here, because Ralph is the person who just does all of this random stuff for us, and I don't really know what I'm doing half the time. So yeah, it is interesting. Maxwell says, "What about Facebook?" Well, here's the thing about Facebook, Maxwell. I'd rather not stream on it altogether. To be honest with you, it feels like a waste of bandwidth. But it is going to be interesting. Gavin says, "Talk about Deuce Knight. He's going to flip." There you go. There's the breaking.
Yep, the Fong Bomb. The Fong Bong is in.
You sound like you said the Fong Bong at first, and I was like, well, I don't know what we're talking about. So there's that. But hey, we're going to talk, and we have people watch after the fact. It's going to be a lot of fun. We'll break this up into individual episodes as well on tonight's episode. SEC trap games. Now, Will, I don't know what your, and Gavin says we up. Yeah, Auburn recruiting. We'll do an episode on that too here pretty soon as well. I don't know what your criteria for trap game was in terms of, was it kind of the location of it on the schedule, the location of it's a home or an away game. I will tell you that I tried to go, it's not just like opponent. I tried to go like where it was on the schedule for me. Like that was kind of my biggest point of criteria with this, is where is this on the schedule to where it could be an issue for a team coming after a big game. Before we get into it, do you have what was your criteria? I guess would be the best way to ask it.
Yeah, mostly where it falls on the schedule, just like you said. And for me, a trap game, I think it's before a big game, like right the week before a big game is usually the trap, I think. But also location goes into it as well. And I try to look at each team individually at their individual schedule, and not other teams. They're potential trap teams. So basically where it falls on the schedule and kind of how I expect the season to play out. Because like we'll get to some of our differences. You took games for some teams late in the year. I took some early in the year. So just these kind of swing games and where I think they'll fall in the 12-game season.
Yeah, I like what you said there, because they could be some swing games. They could be games early in the year that make a factor. They could be games later in the year with a playoff spot on the line, and maybe they're overlooking a big-time opponent. I think it's going to be really good to kind of get into and see. Going to be a longer live episode. Josh says free Ralph. Ralph could not be more free. Driving. He could be more free. He's just on the open roads, but he'll be here obviously in a little bit. All right, let's start off with the Alabama Crimson Tide. We're going to go through not chronological. I don't know how to say it, alphabetical order here. Will, you threw the South Carolina Gamecocks. They're going to be playing South Carolina October the 12th, coming off a game against Vanderbilt right before that big matchup, the third Saturday in October against Tennessee. Walk me through why you chose the Gamecocks and how you feel like this one, or why? Why did you do this, Will? That's what Alabama fans want to know.
Yeah, so this is going to be my sort of common theme. It's about the team we're talking about, not the team they're playing. So this is more about Alabama than it is South Carolina. I think South Carolina has potentially a couple players in the receiving corps, namely Nick Harbor at wide receiver. I think that dude is primed for a breakout. And, if you look at Alabama's roster, I think their biggest deficiencies are in the secondary. But for Alabama, they'll get through some tests before that. Obviously, they played Georgia in Tuscaloosa 2 weeks before. They'll travel to Madison, Wisconsin, and play the Badgers. They'll host South Florida, who gave them trouble last year down in Tampa. But I think this game, heading into the Tennessee game, everybody remembers what happened the last time Alabama went to Knoxville. Tennessee won on a last-second field goal. This could be a potential trap game because it's a lot of the same players that were at Alabama that lost that game. And, everybody has been used to Alabama just owning Tennessee. So I think maybe the players will have a chip on their shoulder and be looking past South Carolina and looking to Tennessee to that big road game the week after. And it's like most other games that I picked, Alabama should be favored in this game, playing South Carolina at home. South Carolina, their season can go a couple different ways. I think it's kind of boom or bust for them. And you think Alabama has the better roster, so they should be favored. So that's why I call this a trap game. You sandwich it in between Georgia and Tennessee. You do have Vanderbilt and Nashville the week before, but it's Vanderbilt. So sandwich South Carolina between two big games in Georgia and Tennessee. Recipe for a trap.
Yeah. Well, and I'll say this too, Will. Like, it's a recipe for a trap. South Carolina for me is going to be a trendy pick throughout this entire show, just in terms of teams having to go play there late in the season. We don't really know what they're going to be, but I do like your pick there. South Carolina, they'll have already played at Wisconsin. They'll have a bye week. Georgia, like you mentioned, at Vandy, which they should handle them. But then this game's officially sandwiched in, like you mentioned, between. I've got the schedule right here. That it's officially sandwiched between. You could say your big non-con game in Wisconsin. No disrespect to South Florida, we like what Golish is doing down there, but Wisconsin, Georgia, and then Tennessee, Missouri, LSU. It feels like that Alabama feels. I'll say this: if they get through the first 4 or 5 games unscathed, do they try to just take a deep breath and say, okay, like let's take a mental break before we kind of get into Tennessee, Missouri, LSU, and the Fighting Mercer Bears? No, I'm just kidding. At Oklahoma and then Auburn. I like it because it's middle of the schedule, and you've played a grueling first half. You could argue, and the back half of the schedule's not really easy either. So South Carolina, I don't know.
Start of the year, no matter what Wisconsin looks like, that's a different road trip that they're not going to be used to, having to go to Madison, Wisconsin. And then Georgia before that. So it's a tough schedule. And like you said, I think if they get, let's just say 4-1 or even 5-0, yeah, do they take a deep breath and think, okay, we got South Carolina at home, we can relax a little bit. And as we know, you can't relax in this conference if you want to win this conference, especially now with no divisions and making the 12-team playoff as an at-large. So you can't take weeks off.
No, you cannot take weeks off. I like your pick, and it was my runner-up to mine. I'll go with mine now. If you want to, I'll let you click on it over there. You get the clicker of banners. I'm going at Oklahoma, and the reason is obviously a lot of people say, "Well, Bryce, it's right before the Iron Bowl. They're going to be looking forward to that game." Here's my thing. I mean, it stays with my theme of I think Oklahoma can be better than that 7.5 win total. Oklahoma is going to be walking into final 2 games. Will. They are going to host Alabama, and they're going to come to Death Valley for the final week of the season. It really feels like those 2 games are going to be must-win games for them to reach the playoff. I think that Alabama could potentially have a playoff spot nearly wrapped up by this juncture of the season. Oklahoma could be playing for their playoff lives. And, going over there, I think this is going to be, we're going to talk about Oklahoma later in the season. They're going to have some big-time games. When Tennessee comes to town, Josh Heupel comes to town in Norman, that's going to be crazy. Here's where I say that this might be the biggest home type of crowd in terms of what could potentially be at stake. You're playing Tennessee earlier in the season if you're Oklahoma. But, man, Alabama, going on the road in November to Norman, this has all the makings of a game that, if you overlook it, if you're looking ahead to the Iron Bowl, maybe Alabama's trying to position themselves, for a bye. You can't afford to really look over an Oklahoma team that could be good. And I'll say this too, and then I'll throw it to you, Will, your thoughts on this. By this juncture of the season, and this kind of goes to my thought process, we should know who Jackson Arnold is. And if Jackson Arnold is good, then that makes this that's why this was a strong candidate for me.
To that point, that's kind of why I don't see it as a trap. Like, we should know who Jackson Arnold is, unless they're going to make a quarterback change late in the season. which I would think is rare. But for me, I think Oklahoma's going to be too good to call them a quote unquote trap. Even if they are a little bit better, like if they roll into that game, they've got 6 or 7 wins. That's probably below their expectations. It'd be around where Vegas has them, but I think that'd be below their expectations. And you've got the Iron Bowl the week before, so you could think they would overlook them. I think if it was at home in Tuscaloosa, they might overlook them more. But as we've talked many times, I've said on the show, I'm not sold that Auburn is going to be doing a whole lot. And Auburn, by the way, has not gone into Tuscaloosa and won since 2010. So not to say it's a foregone conclusion, but I kind of think those players might think it is. So they'll be more locked in to go to Norman, Oklahoma, which again is a different road trip, being Oklahoma's first year in the SEC. So I think Alabama will have a bit more focus than at that point in the year. And like you said, they could have locked up a playoff spot. But again, I don't know that can be the mentality unless you're number 1 or number 2 in the SEC, and probably number 1, because if you're 2 and you lose, you could drop out of the title game, and then there goes your automatic qualifier, and that could knock you completely out of the playoff.
It could.
We just don't know what it's going to look like. So unless you're undefeated late in November, I don't think you take any weeks off.
Yeah, no, you can't take any weeks off. I think, just for me, obviously Oklahoma I think is going to be a good football team. I think more of it comes to the location on the schedule. That Iron Bowl game, regardless of what Auburn's going to be, Will, you know as well as I do, even though they get that game in Tuscaloosa, still going to be one that's going to be crazy.
It'll be close for at least 2 quarters.
Hey, don't look. It's only August the 5th, so you know what? Don't get too down yourself. That's the Alabama Crimson Tide, though. All right, let's move on to the Arkansas Razorbacks.
Yep.
Will, I've got a preview magazine in front of me, and on my way back from Columbus, and I will tell you this: I was looking, and I was nervous, and I was like, okay, where am I going with this? And I started marking in the book, and I almost picked UAB. And so I'm going to let you tell them why you picked the Blazers and Trent Dilfer.
So first of all, you look where it is on the schedule. It's sandwiched in between a trip to Stillwater to play Oklahoma State and a trip to Auburn. And UAB, you look and you say, UAB, first of all, who is UAB? How is Trent Dilfer coaching UAB? I mean, I've heard of Trent Dilfer. I mean, what is this?
Yeah.
Trent Dilfer likes to air the ball out, and they put up a ton of points last year in year 1. If they weren't number 1 in the Sun Belt, or no, they're the American. If they weren't number 1 in the American in points per game, they were top 3. I'm certain they're going to air this thing out. UAB's got an electric offense. They don't play a ton of defense, but I mean, against Arkansas, you probably don't have to play a ton of defense unless Taylon Green is the Boise State transfer, unless he's just a godsend difference maker quarterback. I don't know that you have to play a ton of defense to beat Arkansas this year. Knowing that the firepower UAB possesses and what they want to do on offense, this is a tricky game for Arkansas coming home for a stop in between 2 big road games, high-profile road games. Mm-hmm. So, and we've said it before, this is a swing game for their season, big time. Even if they drop the games to Oklahoma State and Auburn, they have to win this game. If Sam Pittman wants to coach out the season, which he probably will coach out the season, I don't see them changing mid-season with him. But he's got to win this game if he wants any chance of arguing to keep his job for another year. I know it's only game 3 and it's a long year, but he's looking at their schedule. They have to have this game. So this is a huge game on their schedule, and it's going to be tough. It's a tough matchup for Arkansas.
I'll just add to you, it's they have a lot of veterans. They have. It is 3 seniors, a junior, and a sophomore on their offensive line. Jacob Zeno has played a lot of football. He's a good quarterback, and I used him in the College World EA, the new EA game, and he was a lot of fun. Kind of dual threat veteran quarterback. We'll see. That's their big game. I mean, you look at UAB's schedule; they'll play Alcorn State at Louisiana Monroe, then they'll go to Arkansas, then Navy and Tulane. So it's a chance for Trent Dilfer to get a signature win. I don't hate that pick, Will. I almost picked it. Indeed, I think that's going to be an interesting game to watch. And an article came out recently was what are the I think it was something along the lines of like most likeliest group of 5 upsets over Power 4 teams, and this one was on that list.
It has to be number 1.
It has to be on the list. I think
it has to be number
1. Yeah, it has.
There's another game on here. You talk about group of 5 and Power 4 upsets. that I have on this list. Well, there's a couple, but I have one on this list that's a potential as well. So we'll revisit that conversation later.
All right, I stayed in the SEC for this one. There's going to be two common themes for me, Will. It's going to be South Carolina and it's going to be Mississippi State. Because I will just tell you this: I think that Mississippi State has so many variables about it
Yeah.
this year. I don't think the roster is super talented, but I do think that they are going to be able to scheme things just because Jeff Levy's a good coach. By October 26th, I want to make sure I got that date right. We're going to have an idea of what Jeff Levy has with this year's roster. Not him as a head coach, 7 weeks in the season, but if they're going to provide any type of firepower, Davis Wade's a tough place to play. If this happens to be one of those like weird night kickoffs on the SEC network, this has a chance, even a day game. And also, who is Arkansas at this point of the season? I mean, you'll have already played Auburn, A&M, Tennessee, and LSU. You will be looking for a breather before you head back into Ole Miss and Texas, and then Missouri to kind of round out 3 of your last 4 games. Mississippi State, like, you can't just overlook that. You can't think you can take a week off and that's this conference. You can't do that to begin with. But I think that I think Mississippi State's going to be a candidate, especially playing there, where you're at in the schedule. This is a hard one. This was a hard team to do. I'm not picking the Pine Bluff. Outside of UAB, Will, and then Mississippi State, I wasn't really tempted to go anywhere else because I don't think Arkansas is going to be favored against really anybody else on their schedule potentially. Louisiana Tech, but Louisiana Tech's not very good, and I think they'll love when that game comes around. And two, if you're losing to Louisiana Tech, this team's given up. I mean, like they've probably given up at that juncture of the season.
Hey, this is a program that dropped a game at home to North Texas. So I mean, in the not so far past. So it's happened before.
It has. It has. That was the game, I believe, where the kid fair catched it and then ran it for a touchdown.
He didn't even fair catch it.
Or he never
They just assumed that he was going to fair catch it.
Oh, God. You got to love it. All right, let's keep it rolling. We go in from Alabama, Arkansas. We're now going to Auburn. Will, I picked the one that you wanted to pick, I think. But you went Arkansas here. September 21st. They should win this game.
Auburn should definitely win this game. Now, if you've played the new college football game, you would probably disagree with me because for some reason Arkansas is a powerhouse on the game. Don't know why. Nobody really knows why, but everybody that I know that has played them has had a lot of trouble with them. But I mainly picked this one for Auburn because of where it is in the schedule. September 21st, it's game 4, the week before Auburn hosts Oklahoma. Auburn have already played, and I don't know if you want to call it an interesting game, a big game, a marquee game against Cal 2 weeks before. So, and at home, so Auburn will know what it's like. This Auburn team will know what it's like to play in front of a big home crowd. SEC opener, there's going to be a big crowd. There always is for Auburn. Yeah. But this is a very important game for Auburn. You look, like I said, they play Oklahoma the following week, and then Georgia before their bye week, and then they go play Missouri. You think Auburn is going to be favored and should probably win their first 3 games. I mean, this is a team that's got to make a bowl game. This is a team that's got to take a step forward from last year. They won 6 games. They've got to win 7 or 8 games, I think.
Yeah.
A lot of people see 9. I don't see it. But if Auburn drops this game, things could fall apart for Auburn quickly just because of the games that follow, the 4 games that follow. Oklahoma, Georgia, Missouri, Kentucky. Auburn's got to stay on track. They have to hold serve at home and beat the teams that they should beat, especially at home. So this is a really important game for Auburn. And remember, Arkansas is an SEC team. They may not have the depth, but they've got athletes that start on both sides of the ball. They've got SEC caliber athletes, and they're good enough to go into Auburn and beat them. They've nearly done it a couple times under Sam Pittman already. So Auburn can't overlook them going into that Oklahoma game.
I like that pick. And once again, this was my runner-up. And just mentioning those first 3 games, you should win those. Cal's going to be interesting. If you can't stop the run, Jade Knott's going to run all over you. That's going to be something that could be troublesome. Arkansas, though, before you get into that Oklahoma, Georgia, Missouri, Kentucky, you got to win it. You have to start SEC play. Like we said, you have to start SEC play on the right note. Like, if you don't, this season could get ugly. So that's a good one. I will say that my only pushback on that is I think there's going to be so much attention to starting well in SEC play. That's why I went with November 2nd, the Vanderbilt Commodores. And I will just say this. Well, I like what you said about Arkansas. I do believe though that the attention will be there. I
Yep.
just think that once you get from September 21st all the way to November 2nd, look, you're going to have a bye week in between Georgia and Missouri, but you're playing essentially 2 out of 3 weeks on the road for that program's homecoming game. We both think that Georgia and Missouri are going to be pretty good this year. So
Mhm.
you're looking at two potential playoff teams you're playing in the span of 3 weeks. You're going to want some type of reprieve before you go into A&M and Alabama. You get that, you think, in ULM. Thank God Mr. Bowden's not there anymore. Will would have loved that matchup. But Vandy, I mean, look, what what else needs to be said? About this. Essentially, New Mexico State has transferred the entire program over to Nashville. Vandy's got a decent roster. The problem is they play in this conference. They got rated. Diego Pavea, you're going to know who he is in terms of SEC level play. But Will, this is my thing with that kid at quarterback. We've already seen it one time in Jordan Hare. If he has that one night, it's like
Mhm.
anybody can beat anybody on any given day. And Auburn found that out the hard way last year. If these kids have that one night on a night that Auburn's thinking, good Lord, we've just played 4 out of the last 5 weeks against tough competition. We need a little bit of a breather. I don't know. And like you mentioned, you need to win the games at home against teams you should be favored
Mhm.
against. You're going to be favored against Vanderbilt, but I think you might be a better candidate to talk about your worry about Vanderbilt as well.
Yeah, well, I like that you said Vanderbilt because it's very similar to Arkansas, but that Arkansas game, but kind of the opposite. That Arkansas game, you want to come in and keep that momentum. Hopefully, Auburn will start 3-0, and then keep that
Mhm.
momentum and go 4-0. Vanderbilt, I mean, you look at those four games before Vanderbilt, Auburn could very well lose all four of them. So
Yeah.
you got to turn the tide against Vanderbilt, a team that you're going to be better than, that you should just show up and roll over and beat, like Auburn did up in Nashville last year. So it's very similar, but for kind of the opposite reason. And like you said, Diego Pavia. I mean, that guy is fearless. That's why I think him coming to Vanderbilt is really big for that program in a lot of ways, because the guy showed last year he's fearless.
Yeah.
And Jerry Kill, he was a head coach in New Mexico State last year. Now he's a special assistant and advisor type role at Vanderbilt. I mean, that's the attitude that those guys bring in. That it doesn't
Mhm.
matter. We'll play anybody, anywhere, anytime, and we're going to give you our best shot. And a guy like that at a program like Vanderbilt can do a lot of wonders for the future of that program. And he came in and did it against Auburn last year. He could very well do it again in a different jersey this year. So, but Auburn saw him last year, so I would say that they should know. But Hugh Freeze saw him the year before at Liberty when he dropped that game to New Mexico State and Jerry Kill and Diego Pavia 2 years ago at Liberty. So, are they going to make it 3 in a row? I mean, there's a lot of storylines for this game, maybe the most storylines ever for an Auburn Vanderbilt matchup. So it's going to be fun. Come November, Auburn will come back home finally. It's a big game. It is a big game for Auburn.
Yeah, it is. And I will say this too. For a program like Vanderbilt that is going to constantly have to turn over a roster year in and year out, to bring in, like you said, a kid that has already shown in this stage, in one of the toughest environments in this conference, that he can stand the test. And like you said, fearless, and then bring in his head coach, who you kind of have a special advisor who's going to be able to help Clark Lee, who we like Clark Lee. It's just
Mm-hmm.
an unfortunate situation he's in. Help him navigate some of um, these tests as a kind of a still young head coach. It has the recipe to be a game that, like you mentioned, if Auburn is on a 4-game skid, and Vanderbilt's going to be fighting for some type of playoff, or not, I'm sorry, bowl eligibility.
They
They're going
should
to be
be.
fighting for
Yeah,
some type of
they should be.
postseason eligibility. This is a game for Vandy they need, and they could smell blood in the water in this
Mm-hmm.
game too. Like you mentioned, even if Auburn just goes 1-3, will against
Yep.
Oklahoma, Georgia, Missouri, and Kentucky. So I go Vanderbilt. Will goes with Arkansas. And if Brian Harsin would have got the job at New Mexico, we wouldn't have picked them, but it would have
I
been hilarious.
mean, dude, let's not get into that. I could talk about
That's
that for an hour.
that's overbrown.
Let's not do that.
All right, we're going to Florida, and Will, if I'm not mistaken, you and I
We
we'll
did.
just keep it right here. So let's keep right here. You tell me first. I'll add in. I've already kind of said Mississippi State's a common theme for me throughout
Mhm.
tonight's show. Um,
I think I picked them more than once too. But we talk about Vanderbilt being a big game for Auburn. This is a huge game for Florida. I mean, you look at the back half of Florida's schedule. They seriously may have to start 6-0 if they're going to go bowling this year. Seriously. So they've got to have this game. And it comes at a weird time. Their schedule, I think, is weird. They start off with Miami, which whoever does scheduling for Florida probably should update their resume because they might lose their job after this year. They open with Miami, play Samford, and then they host Texas A&M, another big game, and then they go to Mississippi State, and then they're off, and then they host Gus Malzahn and the UCF Knights, the 2024 Big 12 champion UCF Knights. I'm putting that out there. So it's in a weird spot for him. That's kind of why I took it September 21st. And just the fact that they're going to need this game. Billy Napier is going to need this game. If he drops this game, I don't know how they recover. I really don't. It's a huge game. Like you said, Mississippi State, nobody really knows what they're going to be this year, but if anything, they should be fun. And Starkville will be rocking. I think the fan base is very excited about Jeff Lebby. You talked about that earlier. So we've talked about the environment. It's going to be tough. It's a big game for Florida early in the year. They have to have it. Have to have this game.
Yeah. No, I will say this, and Maxwell says that Sanford's going to whoop up on Florida. The hatch attack will be alive and well. Sanford almost did it a couple years ago.
They put up points. I mean, they scored a ton against Auburn last year. Had me nervous for about half the game. I'm not kidding. You laugh. I'm not kidding.
I'll say this. I think that one of the most not talked about stories is, and we'll probably do a show on this when we talk about Florida. Can Graham Mertz be more? Like, can Graham Mertz be dynamic enough to go win you football games? If Florida's going to make a bowl game, he has to be. And I sat here with Mississippi State and I looked at it. Miami, Sanford, A&M. I'm going to be honest with you. I think they could beat UCF. I think that they may be favored in that game, depending on what happens. I'll say if they played now, maybe they're favored. Maybe.
No way.
But the back half of the schedule, I don't know. Mississippi State, like, that's the only game that you would maybe feel like as a Florida fan that you could confidently walk in and go win. But once again, atmosphere. Jeff Lebby is a play caller. I'll tell you this: if Jeff Lebby beats Billy Napier in year one at Mississippi State, the Florida message boards, and shout out my guy Graham Hall over at Swamp 24/7. He and I were talking in Dallas. He's going through it, man. He does not enjoy the message boards right now. I would encourage him to just log off for the weekend if that happens. So Mississippi State.
If Jeff Lebby beats the Florida Gators, he might be the Florida head coach next year. You never know.
Who knows? He might be. He indeed might be. But I think that Lebby and Mississippi State are just such a wild card. Such a wild card in this scenario. So that's why I'm taking the Bulldogs. All right, let's
since we're talking about Florida real quick, you said can Graham Mertz be more, and we'll talk about this probably, like you said, do a whole show. If Florida drops this game and drops another one early on, probably before Tennessee, you're going to see DJ Lagway. You're going to see him playing because that freshman quarterback, he's dynamic. He can do more with his legs than Graham Mertz. I'm sure we'll see both quarterbacks during the season, especially if they drop a game early.
Well, if they're 1-3 heading into UCF, you might see DJ Lagway.
He might start that game.
Because you go into a bye week on September 28th, you come out on the 5th and play UCF. If I was Billy Napier, I would just want to get Lagway's feet wet before his first start cannot be in Knoxville. That cannot happen. So it has to happen in the Swamp against the Knights. But just brutal, brutal schedule. All right, we move on to another team. Will, this was hard for me. Georgia's schedule is hard. Austin Biley says Kentucky is one, and
we'll get to that.
Yeah, we'll get to that. But you could pick Mississippi State as why not?
It's more of the same. You just look where Mississippi State is. October 12th. So 2 weeks before that, Georgia plays Alabama in Tuscaloosa. Then they host Auburn the week after that, or the week before that, and then the week after the Mississippi State game, they travel to Austin to play Texas. So it's just where it falls in the schedule. I hate to say this, but it's happened so much, and I'm trying to not have this mentality. But I mean, they're probably going to dog walk Auburn like they've done in Athens basically the whole time Kirby Smart's been the head coach.
Mhm.
Are they going to overlook Mississippi State? I doubt it with Kirby Smart, but it's really just where it falls in the schedule. And we've talked enough about Mississippi State, so we can move on.
I picked Kentucky, and I will tell you for the
Good
same reason that
storyline.
I
Some
picked
juicy
Kentucky.
storylines for this one.
Well, I'm going to preview. I'll say that, but I picked Kentucky. Well, I was this close to picking Auburn because I think this Alabama game is going to be such an emotional game in terms of if they win. This might be a hot take. If Georgia goes to Tuscaloosa and wins, I'm putting them on upset watch the next week. I don't care what Auburn's record is. Knowing Georgia fans, having been one myself at some point, I will say that is going
Why are
to
you
be
talking
for a
like
lot
that?
of people. I know. That is going to be for a lot of people, Will, this crowning moment of winning there. They have not won there since 2007. You know, it's going to, in my opinion, Auburn has a potential to capitalize on a over emotional Georgia team. Now, look, Kirby Smart is one of the best at people keeping people focused. But I'm going to talk more here, Kentucky. Storylines. If Brock Vandegrift's a dude, you're going to figure out in this game. I think that if Georgia has some flaws, Clemson's defense is going to be able to show those flaws. Offense, I don't know how Clemson's offense is going to do against Georgia's defense, but defensively, I think that they're going to be able to, show some flaws just because Clemson's defense is that good, if there are any. You go to Kentucky. Well, this has been a game that Kentucky has constantly had good seasons, but they just can't knock off Georgia. You get them this time earlier in the season where you've traditionally played them. They've played some brutally cold weather games against, like a couple years ago. It was legitimately like 12 degrees and windy. Good friend of the show, Palmer Thompson, he was miserable the entire time up there in the Commonwealth States. So Kentucky, Brock Vandegrift, can Mark Stoops, get that signature win over a long-time opponent that they haven't been able to get the big win against. They've had them, against the ropes. They just have not been able to knock them off. So, but I think because of Clemson, Tennessee Tech, and then you're going to Alabama. I mean, is there a chance? Now, what helps you here, Will, if you're a Georgia fan watching this after the fact or listening, what helps you here is you have a bye week in between Kentucky and Alabama. So if Kirby Smart is able to sell it as this is a 1-week season, which a lot of coaches will do, it might help the fact that they have a bye week on the back end of this.
Yeah. I want to go back to what you said about Brock Vandegrift. We're going to find out. We're going to find out how good he is, because honestly, you should be able to just run the ball against Southern Miss and South Carolina and win those two games, without much difficulty. So we'll find out against Georgia, and like you said, we're going to find out a lot about Georgia's offense right away against Clemson. Now, you look at Georgia's schedule, Clemson seriously might be the best defense Georgia faces all year, and it comes in week 1. It really could be. So, we'll find out a lot, and this being week 3, it's a big game. I love that this is early in the year, because I've wanted to see how Kentucky would match up against Georgia earlier in the year, because like you said, they played late October, November so many times, basically exclusively our whole lives. And especially you go to Kentucky in November, that's miserable. It's not fun. You're not going to air the ball out. You got to run the ball just because it's so cold and the weather's so bad. But it's going to be fun. I'm glad you said that.
Well, and I'll add this too. I mean, you talk about storylines. Jamon Dumas Johnson is going to be starting at linebacker for them too. And this is a guy who a lot of people said, oh, he wasn't going to. He was literally pushed out because he got hurt, and Georgia's linebacking core was that good. This guy is legitimately a Butkus Award finalist. Like, that's what Kentucky brought in. And they've got a really, really good defensive tackle in Deion Walker that is, you're going to test kind of, a lot of people think Tate Ratledge might be the best offensive lineman in the SEC. I don't believe so. Maybe interior he might be. I think that reserves the title down here in Baton Rouge for a couple guys. But Deion Walker, I mean, here's your chance. Like, if you're Kentucky and you're Mark Stoops, you've built up, you've lost some games to him, here's your chance. You got to try to catch Georgia early in the season, and maybe that's where you can get them. So that does take us into talking about the Kentucky Wildcats, Will, which is another interesting one. And I like where you went with this. This is a good choice. This is a good choice.
Yep. So, I got to talk about Auburn. You got to let me talk about Auburn some. And for me, this is just solely where Auburn falls on the schedule. You picked Kentucky to finish ahead of Auburn in your SEC rankings. I said you were crazy. I've seen other people have Kentucky, and then Auburn in their list. I think they're crazy because I think Auburn's gonna go into Lexington and beat Kentucky. Kentucky has not really been a team that's given Auburn trouble in the past. I know they haven't played a ton, being in different divisions of the SEC previously, but Auburn has played well against Kentucky. They haven't really been a problem in the past, but for Kentucky, this is a trap because it falls in between the Florida game and the Tennessee game, and both of those games are on the road, so they get to come home for one game and play Auburn. It's a tricky area. We talked about Auburn earlier. You look, Auburn's got that. This is the last game of that brutal 4-game stretch for Auburn in the middle of their season. What's Auburn going to look like? I mean,
yeah,
I think Auburn will go through that 4-game stretch at 2-2. That's what I think. Could they be 3-1? Could they steal one of those games on the road against Georgia and Missouri? Do they roll into this game 0-3? I mean, we don't know. It could be anything. Auburn could go a bunch of different ways for Auburn in this game, but if Auburn comes in with momentum, like say Auburn goes to Columbia and beats Missouri, I mean they come in this game with a lot of momentum. Kentucky struggles against Florida, which they have historically. This is an interesting game for Kentucky, and to me, kind of will determine how the rest of their season goes and where they finish. They do have a difficult finish. Like I said, they go to Tennessee after this game. They host Murray State. They go to Texas, and they host Louisville, a tough ACC team. So, like I said about Florida, they need that Mississippi State game. I feel like Kentucky needs this game if they want to really make a good bowl game. I don't think they're a playoff contender, because I think they'll have to be an at-large, so I'm not sure they're a contender, but they got to have this game if they want a good bowl game.
Yeah, I agree with you there too. In just the sense of it's sandwiched between two kind of like tier 2 rivalry games. Kentucky, Florida, Kentucky, Tennessee. There's no bye week in between those, so they're going to have to host Auburn. But what will they be at that point of the season? I mean, they could legitimately have 2, maybe 3 losses on the schedule already. That kind of takes me into my team that I picked, and I'm going with Shane Beamer's crew. I think, maybe this goes against the logic I used earlier with yours. Yes, it's the first SEC game, but Kentucky, we just got done talking about it, wants to knock off Georgia. South Carolina is a team that is going to be, rolling in, and Shane Beamer has won in Lexington. He did 2 years ago, the last time these two teams faced off. It was later in the season that year. This is a week 2 matchup. If Lenoris Sellers is anything as advertised, this could be a coming out party. I know that, I mentioned Deion Walker earlier in the show. Deion Walker's a very good, he's going to be an NFL draft pick type of player, and a high one potentially at that for the Kentucky Wildcats. But what else do they have defensively? And if Brock Vandegrift's not comfortable early on, it could pose a problem for a South Carolina team and a fan base, and we've heard it a lot from their fan base, that feels like their defense could be pretty good this year, especially with the front seven. So I'm going. I picked South Carolina for this one. I think Shane Beamer's a wild card when it comes to being able to get up for games. I know that South Carolina is going to be playing LSU the next week in Columbia. I'll use kind of your logic from there. This kind of feels like a game South Carolina might need to go on the road and win to get to 6 wins and go to a bowl game.
Yeah, well, I think from South Carolina's perspective, I think this game is more gettable than that LSU game. I know it's on the road, but like you said, they've had success against Kentucky, and I saw a South Carolina fan put on Twitter, since Kentucky vacated all their wins from, what was it, last year? They said, "Hey, Shane Beamer's undefeated against Kentucky." That game last year didn't count, so they, this is a game they feel like they can win. They'll probably feel like they'll have a better shot in this game than they do against LSU. And I think that I could see South Carolina coming into this game being fired up.
I like it, and look, a good friend, Jacob, says, "Good point, Bryce. I think South Carolina is unpredictable." Jacob and Will met each other for the first time in person, I believe. Michael says, "What's up, Bryce?" Dr. Bob, he's a little bit behind. He says, "Hugh Freeze got to figure out the play calling on the Plains. They're going to have success." Will could do a whole diatribe on that. If you
go
like
read what I just wrote the other day.
Yeah, just come on. Yeah, I mean, it is what it is.
Pick up the written content for once.
It is what it is. All right, let's talk here. Let's talk LSU. This is one, Will, where you went Vandy. Um, I I can s- I
This,
know why you went Vandy. I'll say that.
yeah, where it is on the schedule, and it's kind of weird. I think picking a game so late in the year. LSU will host Vanderbilt November 23rd, second to last game of the year, but it's right in between a trip to Florida and hosting Oklahoma. Just where it is on the schedule. We talked about Diego Pavia earlier. The dude is fearless. I don't think he'll necessarily be phased by Death Valley unless he's beaten up by the time this game shows up, because that offensive line uh, probably won't do him many favors. And
Yeah.
he's also a guy that doesn't shy away from contact. So he might get himself in a little bit of danger if he's banged up coming in this game. That might affect his how gung ho, how aggressive he is. But just where it falls in the schedule, that trip for LSU going to Gainesville is always a big game, always a big trip for them. And the week before that, they play Alabama. So this is like you were talking about earlier with a couple teams. This is kind of a breather game at the end of the season for LSU. But they're going to need this game. They can't afford to take this game off.
Yeah, I agree with you. And Will, I just changed mine at the last second there. I did get a slight change, so it was. I just
Oh, I
changed
see
it.
that.
We'll go there. But no, look, I mean, breather games at the end of the year. Is LSU on November 23rd? Are they in position for the 10th, 11th spot in the playoff? And are they looking ahead, knowing, and a game that I continue to circle for people is that Oklahoma game, the Saturday after Thanksgiving. I think that could be a de facto play-in game for the 10 or 11 seed. So, but do you overlook Vanderbilt? I don't know. I will say this. I think, and just, from the first couple of days of spring practice or fall practice, I haven't been there, but I've talked to a lot of people. The offense looks really, really dang good. And I think this is a game. I think they could outscore Vandy. But like you said, if they come in slow, lethargic, who knows? If they get upset by Florida the week before, are they down? Will they have lost back to back games against Alabama and Florida? It's interesting to see. All right, I'm going to move to my prediction here for LSU. I had Florida just because I think Florida could be. If Florida is just like 2-8 or something at this point of the season, Will, talking with fans, LSU fans are nervous about going down there because if Florida's going to muster one final stand in the 2024 season, it feels like hosting LSU, which is a good rivalry, that could be it. But I didn't. I changed it because I'm going Arkansas just because of that location on the schedule, and maybe a similar theme, Will, in Arkansas's last stand. Trying to keep the job of their head coach Sam Pittman, but you play what is going to be a track meet of a football game against Ole Miss the week before. Then obviously you go to Texas A&M and College Station where LSU does not have good success. So can you lock in for 3 straight weeks against an Arkansas team, which, well, I don't know if you remember this a couple years ago, LSU goes and plays Arkansas, and it was like 12, it was like 10 degrees.
Yeah,
And that
I
was kind of
remember
the
this.
Harold Perkins breakout game where he tracked down, it wasn't KJ Jefferson, it was the other kid that played quarterback. It's now at Arkansas State playing wide receiver. Malik Jefferson, I believe his name was. Whoever it was. But I think LSU, Arkansas, that's an old time rivalry. Arkansas almost came to Baton Rouge and beat them last year. Just kind of something to watch because if LSU starts out 5-0 and rolls into Ole Miss and wins that game 6-0, emotions at all time high. You got to watch out because Arkansas, I think, is going to be a physical football team. And kind of like you talked about the quarterback position earlier in the show, Will, if that's something where he's just dynamic enough,
Mhm.
maybe Arkansas and Sam Pittman find a signature win that keeps him a little not as scalding hot on the hot seat as people might think he is that juncture of the season.
Yeah, we say that, and we'll talk more about Arkansas here as we keep going. I don't know. Even if they win this game, man, I don't know. I don't see Sam Pittman going another year.
Yeah.
I think there's going to be a very attractive name from the state of Arkansas they're going to go after, but that's a different show. Yeah, I'm with you. This is a very tricky spot in LSU's schedule. But I think going to College Station the following week, which is always a weird game, surely they'll be looking more toward that. But if a trip to Fayetteville was sandwiched in between 2 home games, that would make it even bigger trap.
Yeah.
But yeah, we hadn't mentioned him yet, so I'll mention him. What this Bobby Petrino offense, by midseason, are they going to have it? I mean, it's known as one of the more intricate and demanding offenses on a quarterback as anybody has. So, we talk about Arkansas's quarterback position. What does that look like? If things are running well for Arkansas, this is no gimme for LSU.
Yeah, I like that. It's not a gimme, and if LSU's defense isn't much improved, we'll see what happens. I mean, I'm hesitant to say
I forgot
anything.
about
We'll
that
see.
defense, man. Whew.
If that defense isn't much improved, then we'll have to see kind of what happens. So, all right, let's move along though. We talk about this team that we've been mentioning and a lot. Or no, we haven't mentioned this one a lot as much. But
Yeah,
Ole Miss, a lot of people think they're going to make the playoff. I kind of think they might. But I meant
definitely
to
got
say
a
is the team
shot.
that we keep mentioning. You're rolling with the
Really good
Razorbacks.
shot. Yeah, I'm going Ole Miss going Arkansas for Ole Miss. Just because of where it falls in the schedule. This is sandwiched in between Ole Miss hosting Oklahoma and hosting Georgia.
Yeah.
2 big games, especially that Georgia game. After the way Ole Miss went to Athens last year, that Lane Kiffin's got this game circled to at least do better, and especially now with no Nick Saban in the SEC, Kirby Smart, I'm sure, is Lane Kiffin's number 1 target. So I certainly think he's going to try to be dialed up for that game. Does that mean he doesn't take as much time for Arkansas? Probably does. I would think it does, knowing Lane Kiffin. But like you said, they're going to be gunning for a playoff spot. So you just don't know. And like we just got done saying about Arkansas, you just don't know what they're going to be. We don't expect to be that good, but if they know who they are and what they do by this point, Ole Miss has got to be focused for this game. They have to be in between 2 big ones.
Yeah, in between 2 big ones, you could also argue. You have the bye week on the week before Oklahoma, but you're going to be playing at LSU, at South Carolina, and that's kind of why I picked who I picked. Will I went South Carolina with this one because once again another thing of who is South Carolina going to be, and this game is going to have a ton of juice because Juice Wells is now in Oxford, Mississippi, the former South Carolina receiver. There has been a lot of social media battling between both programs. Obviously, some bad blood. A couple South Carolina players went to Instagram and called Juice Wells a sellout. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be very interesting. So not for that fact of, I don't know, you can make the argument either way, Will, because of that storyline. Does it make it a trap game? It maybe not, but also because of that storyline, does it? Because South Carolina, this might be the one game where you look at their schedule. Yeah, they're going to want to win a lot of them, but there's going to be a little added oomph, and you're going to be obviously playing them in your home stadium. Who knows? I think when Mr. Wells takes the field at Williams-Brice, it's going to be pretty rude. So I really do believe that we could see a situation here where Ole Miss is undefeated and they roll into South Carolina. They're looking ahead at LSU, Oklahoma, and maybe they stump their toe in a year where if you don't make the playoff, I've said this multiple times, you don't make the playoff in your Ole Miss this year, it's a massive disappointment because this is a talented roster.
With Juice Wells going to Ole Miss certainly adds some juice to this game. Oh, see what I did there? And what otherwise would probably be a pretty boring matchup that people wouldn't really watch. Definitely will add some energy, especially early on. First time he touches the ball, I'm sure they're going to try to knock his head off.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's a good pick before they play LSU because we know that's going to be a big game.
Well, I want to go somewhere with this. Maxwell says Mizzou, and he said we skipped the M going alphabetically. It's because we went as Mississippi University, not Ole Miss.
Oh wow, you just did the opposite of what all the Auburn recruits do.
Yeah.
It's the University of Mississippi.
Yeah. So we went as them as Mississippi, not Ole Miss. So we're going to backtrack here. go to the next one. Next team we got on the docket here is Mississippi State. You go Arizona State here.
Yep,
We've
I
talked
do.
so much about Mississippi State. Wild card, you got to go to Arizona State. These two teams played last year, I believe, and
In a weird game. It was a late,
no.
game.
Apologies,
No.
they played Arizona last year, not Arizona State.
Yeah, that's right. And
Okay,
they
so
played them at home, but it was still a later kickoff, I think. So
it was like 11 o'clock or something like that.
yeah, it
Ridiculous.
was bizarre and like it ended weird. Like nobody. Anyway, they play Arizona State this year. They go out to Tempe, which is weird. I think playing Arizona State period is kind of weird. But Arizona State, year two under Kenny Dillingham, a guy that had been in the SEC, was at Auburn for a year, been the offensive coordinator for a lot of big time programs. Now gets his shot as a head coach at his alma mater. I think they're going to be fun to watch. Defense will probably be optional. And again, we don't know what Mississippi State is going to look like. We know they're going to try to push the ball a lot. I think both these teams will push it a lot. It's going to be a fun game. And it's week 2. And, talk about teams needing games. I think this is a game Mississippi State is going to need if they want to do anything. If they're going to push for a bowl game, they got to win this game out of conference. And Arizona State, they're probably not going to do a whole lot in the Big 12, their first year in the Big 12. So can Mississippi State go out west and get a win and try to make a bowl game in year 1 for Jeff Levy?
Yeah, and you mentioned too, Will, you saw Auburn have to do this. Cal's obviously further, but just going to across the Mississippi, I think would be the best way to put it. What does that do in terms of just travel? How does Jeff Levy handle that as a head coach in year 1 at a program traveling out there? I think that's a good pick.
And then even weirder, I think you talk about that, the travel and everything. They come back home and play Toledo, who is no slouch.
Probably one of the best MAC programs, by the way.
Yeah. So I mean, it's kind of a back-to-back weeks of potential traps for Mississippi State, just simply because of the weird travel there. But it's a weird matchup. We've talked a lot about Mississippi State. They're going to be the underdogs in most of their games. So I just kind of felt like if they drop this game and that travel's bad on them, they could be 0-3 before they play Florida, and it could be a really or one. No, they'll probably be Eastern Michigan. They'll 1-2 before they play Florida. That would be a big disappointment.
Dr. Bob says Holy Toledo there for the comedic relief. And once again, I'm just gonna say, I picked Arkansas. I don't really want to talk about it as much anymore, but you split between Georgia A&M. You get UMass on there the schedule as well, but I picked Arkansas. It's Arkansas. So
It's Arkansas.
I feel like a game you got to have, but if you overlook them, could spell doom for 2024 for Jeff Levy. All right, let's move on now to Missouri, which you picked the Minutemen.
Said UMass.
The fighting Tyson Pumachons.
This is this is a disgusting game. And Sickos committee on watch for this game because this is disgusting. They're going to go to Amherst and play UMass on October 12th after they go to Texas A&M.
Why in October, by the way? Why are you playing this game in October?
Why are you playing at UMass? I mean, what are we doing here? I mean, this is disgusting. It's a weird game. Having to go up to the Northeast. I almost picked another team from the Northeast in Boston College, but I was just like, UMass is disgusting. It's just a gross game. Why are they scheduling this game? Maybe the players have the same mentality I do, and they're like, they're awful. UMass needs a homecoming opponent.
That's a good one there, Dr. Bob. Yes.
But like, what is this? Why are we doing this? Maybe the players will have the same mentality, and it might end up being a game. And we like Missouri a lot. We think they have a good defensive line, but what if they can't tackle the big Tyson Pumachon? I mean, you never know. But this is weird. It's so weird.
If Missouri doesn't make the playoff, it's a disappointing season in Columbia.
If I'm calling this a trap game, but they're probably going to go up there and beat UMass by 50 if they want to. But it's just having to go to UMass. That makes no sense. Right in the middle of the season.
Well, I'll say this too. I mean, who for UMass is going to guard Theo Weiss, Mookie Cooper, and Luther Burden Jr.? I mean, that's the problem. That's the problem. No, and
I mean, maybe Brady Cook forgets that they're. Maybe he thinks they're wearing, what do they wear? Crimson? I don't know. It's dark red, whatever it is. I don't know what
to be honest with you. I picked South Carolina for this one, Will. And November, you got to go there. sandwich between Alabama, Oklahoma, the Mississippi State, Arkansas. If Missouri overlooks getting into Mississippi State, which if you're overlooking South Carolina for Mississippi State, I think that's a whole type of culture problem in your program to begin with. Missouri was kind of hard to find one because it's a lot of
Yeah.
veterans that are going to be playing football and no real just big ones. I mean, you said UMass. If UMass had any semblance of life as a program, then might be a better choice. But I went South Carolina, and that's all I really care to talk about with that one. So it'll
Hey,
be,
look,
yeah.
we can add this. Missouri, they do have to go to Columbia, South Carolina, which is a tough place to play, but they got a little bit lucky. They don't have to go there in Cocktober. So
That is true. But
good
I
for
will
them.
say this. I will say this. A similar team went to South Carolina late in the season in Tennessee. It has still had an outside chance of the playoff, even after they lost to Georgia that year. Missouri, if you lose to South Carolina late in the season, that really dings up the playoff resume. So
You
yes,
heard me,
Maxwell.
Maxwell. You heard me.
You heard him. So that's where I'm going with that one. All right, South Carolina, let's keep rolling through these because I'm about to fall asleep. No, I'm just kidding. All right, we're going to Oklahoma. Will, you at non-con here? This is a fun non-con slate. You got the fighting Jeff Collins there in week 1, along with the fighting Matt Rules against Temple that Oklahoma's going to be playing. And Will, not even a smile. There we go. Will got a smile out of that one.
I was like, what is he talking about? They don't play North Carolina.
They don't play North Carolina. But you have Houston, and then you face Willie Fritz's team that he came from the next week in Tulane. But man, you ain't Houston here. I will say this, Will. I've talked with a lot of crews in Louisiana that loved Willie Fritz's staff at Tulane, and they're following him to Houston. I think that this was a really, really good hire for Houston. I'm excited to see what Fritz can do. But is it enough in year 1 to pull off the upset? We'll see. But I like your pick here.
Yeah, I don't know, but I thought what you said. I thought about that a lot when picking this one. I remember what Willie Fritz did at Tulane last year against Oklahoma. It gave him a ton of fits down there in New Orleans. So maybe he's got their number, and he and his staff kind of have their number. And I think from Oklahoma's perspective, you probably think that you can just show up and you probably will hang 70 on Houston, which they may very well could. And you might be looking ahead to that Tulane game because I think on paper Tulane a little bit better than Houston is right now. And Houston's year 1, Willie Fritz, definitely a much bigger rebuild job than the one he left John Summerall down in Tulane. And then obviously Oklahoma hosts Tennessee a couple weeks later. So just the mentality thing. Do you overlook Houston? You've got a head coach and his staff who had a lot of success in the game against you last year. How do you react coming into this one? And, with it being the second game of the year, what does this do for Oklahoma's season? What does it do for their playoff potential? Does it change anything? Does it make them more susceptible to dropping a game later that will keep them out of the playoff?
I like what you said there, and I ended up changing my pick, Will. I was going to go with the Maine Black Bears on November the 2nd. No, I'm just kidding.
Wait a minute.
Yes, they played that game in Norman.
That game was that game was 3 years ago?
I feel so old.
There's no way that game was 3 years ago. But I'll say that this, with everything that's changed in college football, it feels like this offseason has felt like it's been like 5 years.
No, you're not wrong. I'll go quickly here as we roll through these. I went to
at least I was right about Willie Fritz being there.
Hey, there you go. There you go. I went to Lane here, Will, just because, and in our, he's not here tonight, but in our other co-host, Tulane, as he says, pronounces this team, the Tulane Green Wave. Look, I mentioned earlier Oklahoma is going to host Alabama, but a lot of fans are salivating at hosting Tennessee in week 3 or week 4.
Mm-hmm.
John Summerall has a legitimate team in New Orleans. Like, they are going to be very fun to watch this year. I know Dr. Bob's in the comments, and I know he's excited, going to try to get us some games. This is one where if Oklahoma starts peeking ahead at what's to come, Tennessee and Auburn, much like what you said here with Houston, Will, I think Tulane might be the better team than Houston, with what you kind of mentioned. The Green Wave could play themselves. Might be a hot take. if for some reason John Summerall's not hoisting the American Conference trophy at the end of the year, a win against Oklahoma could put them in the conversation for an at-large bid, which would be crazy to think about in terms of a Group of 5 team getting one. Here's an opportunity, and it's Tulane obviously going to be able to play Oklahoma. I like this matchup for them. I think that you get Jackson Arnold earlier in the season. What is he? Has he really been tested against a good defense? I will say this: LSU sat and waited, and Dr. Bob, you can get the names for me. But Tulane's defensive lineman, LSU sat and waited for him to enter the portal, and he never did. He stayed with John Summerall, stayed with there, and I think they could cause some havoc against an offensive line that will, before we get chastised in the comments section later, we know that they have some guys returning, but it's a lot of turnover in terms of guys playing together. And Dr. Bob also says this: Aiden Huntington's a name to watch out at defensive end. It's not the guy I was talking about, but Huntington is a legitimate pass rusher off the edge. And I like Tulane in this one. So that's going to be a fun game to watch, but an interesting non-con schedule. An interesting non-con schedule there for Oklahoma, testing themselves before they get to SEC play.
Yep.
So, all right, let's good Lord, let's get through this. I hate how many teams are in this conference. Just wait for Wednesday night when we're sitting here at 9:30 talking about Pitt. That's going to be a lot of fun.
Do we have to?
I don't want to. Let's just quickly get through this, Will. Vandy. We've talked about your pick in Vandy. Any words on that?
No, nothing to add.
Okay.
This game, where is this game? Nashville?
It's in Nashville on November the 9th between A&M and Missouri.
Yep. Just swing game for South Carolina. That's all it is.
Yeah. Tennessee. You went Mississippi State here. I know we talked about Mississippi State, but they're going to play the Bulldogs between Alabama, Kentucky, and then Georgia. Could be.
Really just where it falls in the schedule. I was thinking maybe Arkansas, but they have a bye week in between Oklahoma and Arkansas, so they can kind of refocus. And that is a tough little stretch for them. They play at Arkansas, and then they host Florida, and then Alabama. I say tough because we know what Florida's been able to do against them in recent years. But I go Mississippi State just because of where it falls in the schedule.
I like it. I went Arkansas here. Could Arkansas score a marquee win to score some points with the Tyson Chicken Nugget people to keep him around and Sam Pittman? We'll see. We will see. But I think that's a game where you go to Oklahoma, you have a bye week. Coming out of the bye week, you shouldn't be overlooking Arkansas, but we'll see. You got to go there. Arkansas has historically had some big wins inside their home stadium, whether they're playing at Little Rock or wherever they decide to play that week. So it is.
Give up a home game to go to Little Rock makes no sense.
Exactly. And if Nico's not good, we'll see. Well, I think he's going to be good, but
yeah, I think so too.
All right, Texas. Well, I don't even know who I picked for Texas. Do we pick the same one?
We both picked Kentucky.
Okay,
and you probably for the same reasons. Because that game is sandwiched in between a trip to Arkansas and a trip to Texas A&M. We've talked about Texas and Texas A&M, that rivalry being back. It's a nasty rivalry. Kentucky, who knows what they'll be? I kind of lean on the side that they'll kind of be out of things by this point. Is Texas going to overlook them? Because they're definitely going to have Texas A&M circled on their schedule. We know Texas A&M is going to have Texas circled on their schedule. So I could see Texas overlooking Kentucky, getting ready for that A&M matchup, especially having to go to A&M. First time they played each other in over a decade.
Yep.
It'll be a ton of fun. And this is an opportunity for Kentucky to steal a game on the road and possibly ruin Texas's playoff chances. Probably won't, because they'll probably be in the SEC championship game, but it could hurt their seeding for sure. Could cost them from hosting a playoff game.
And two, let's say Brock Vandagriff has an up and down year. This could be a game where he not just gives himself confidence, but gives this fan base confidence that he can be the guy heading into his second full season up there in Lexington. So I like what you said there too, and I echo it 100%. Aggie land.
Somebody's just ready to go to bed.
Yeah, I'm exhausted. You went South Carolina here. Did I go South Carolina too?
You did.
Yeah.
Here we go. Oh no. Poor Maxwell. He didn't get to hear me say it again, because this game's actually November 2nd. But it's in Columbia. It's going to be a rocking crowd because South Carolina's probably a game that they think they can get for they cut. Can I get it? Can I speak? Words are hard. South Carolina comes into this game off of a bye week after playing Oklahoma, which another underrated matchup. The Beamer going back to Oklahoma, good storylines there. Williams-Brice Stadium is going to be rocking for this game. This was Texas A&M's one of their crossover games a lot in the old setup of the SEC. So these two teams played each other quite a bit, and it was always a big matchup. I remember. Oh geez, who was I'm blanking on the quarterback's name now for Texas A&M when they went to South Carolina and dropped that game.
Yes.
I'm blanking on his name, but that was a fun game. It was
really good athlete, ended up transferring to TCU and playing, but I can't remember his name.
It was one of those weird night SEC network kicks, like 7:30 kick, and Williams-Brice was Maxwell says I can still say it. I can't because it's in November. It's not the month. But yeah, one of those weird kickoffs. It's going to be rocking. Like I said, I think South Carolina, they'll view this game as one they can get. Texas A&M coming off what'll probably be, and better than just about anybody, how weird the Texas A&M LSU rivalries have been. Dr. Bob's got it. Kenny Hill. That's it.
Kenny Hill. Yes.
Kenny
Thrill. I love it.
He was fun to watch. Bit of a letdown opportunity for Texas A&M coming off of what's probably going to be a weird and draining and exhaustive game against LSU because those games are always weird. And I think Williams-Brice Stadium will be rocking.
Yeah, I like that pick for everything that you said. So good job on that. All
right, strap in. Here we go. We got a lot to talk about right here.
All right, so we are at an hour and 7 minutes. We're going to spend the next 53 minutes talking about a team that we saw in person kick off fall practice last Thursday. Shout out to Georgia State. But I'll say this. Georgia State's a transitional program right now. They've undergone a lot of transition. We heard Del McGee talk about this. A lot of new faces, a lot of and look, Maxwell says it right there, against the best team in Atlanta. Clark Atlanta does have a club football team now. I will say
Never said that.
Yeah, well, just get ready for August 31st.
Never said that.
But let's say this, like, if Del McGee wants to score a big win in year one, here it is. Like an SEC win. I mean, obviously you have Georgia Tech coming, you're going to go there, but you get to welcome an SEC opponent, into that stadium, which is going to be a lot of fun. But man, if for some reason Pavea is not good, or he's hurt, or I don't know. I just think also, Will, when you look at this schedule, like, not trying to dog on Vandy here, man, but Alcorn State. Do we pick an Alcorn State to be the trap game? Like, who are you picking?
Are we picking Ball State? Maybe in between.
Maybe if you're Georgia Tech and you lose to MAC teams on the regular, you might pick that.
There it is.
No, I'm just kidding. But I think it's got to be Georgia State because you got to go down there. It's a road game playing against a Sun Belt team. Ralph's going to love that. Ralph is going to love seeing an SEC team go on the road to a Sun Belt conference opponent. But
Ralph needs to be at that game.
I don't know. Your thoughts on Georgia State? It's a transitional program, but seriously, they've got some dudes, and Will, we saw them. They've got some receivers that could be a problem.
Yeah,
they've got some good athletes. If they could put it together for this one game, they could win.
Yeah, they've got some good athletes. Quarterback position, obviously a question. Zach Gibson and Chris Velo both transferring in from the ACC. Gibson from Georgia Tech, Velo from Pitt. But they've got some athletes, some good receivers. Their coaching staff, man, I got to tell you, I was floored seeing some of the dudes out there coaching underneath Del McGee. What a staff he's been able to put together quickly in his first year as a head coach. Jim Chaney's the offensive coordinator. He's got Damian Craig, his former teammate I think they were teammates at Auburn.
Mm-hmm.
Del might have been maybe been right before Damian Craig, but both played at Auburn. Been a wide receiver coach in the SEC, ACC for a number of years. Pete agrees. Just a really good staff. Hugh Jackson is there as assistant GM. It's a really good staff. So
Will Healy is there. Yeah.
Will Healy, former Charlotte head coach. Yes. So it's going to be, I think, as far as off the field, they'll be ready. And he's got a group around him that will have him ready for that moment. This is really, I mean, obviously, like I said, they go to Georgia Tech before that, but this they'll be ready for this. And he's seen Vanderbilt. He knows what to expect. Jim Chaney knows what to expect. Been in the SEC for a long time, and you know, if I'm Vanderbilt, I'm not taking this game lightly. I mean, this is Georgia State. If like you said, if they hit right, if they can hit right, you know, obviously we saw the first 20 minutes to an hour of practice. I think we ended up getting to see an hour. Obviously it was day one, very early, and I think we saw enough to say, like, this. They're obviously not here yet. We don't expect them to be there day one, but we don't think they'll be pushing to win the Sun Belt. There's some really good teams in the Sun Belt. It's a really good conference, but you know, we liked what we saw, and like what Del McGee has done there. Like you said, this would be huge. So I think Georgia State is going to be ready. They're going to be gunning for this game, no doubt about it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you look at what Vanderbilt's schedule is. They're going to have played Virginia Tech, which we expect them to lose that game. Alcorn State, I mean, I guess they'll show up to that as well. But Georgia State, I mean, you honestly look at it. You got to go down there. You go to Atlanta. Georgia State gets to sleep at home. I mean, there's just a lot of different factors. If that hits right for the Panthers, they can win that game. And outside of that, I mean, the only other games you're going to be favored in potentially is, and Will, I don't even know if they're going to be favored against Georgia State. I'm going to be completely honest with you.
They may not. Comment of the night right here from
God.
Maxwell.
Jesus.
Yeah, you're exactly right. They may not be favored, and that'd be a wild line to see. Georgia State is a favorite against Vanderbilt.
Well, you know what? This has been a wild show. We've been on and off the air on YouTube multiple times. I don't know what's happening, but I do appreciate the people watching and staying tuned. I've had 6 or 7 people text me and say, "Hey, you're going off and on." We appreciate it. We'll obviously get this the archived up there. We'll have the individual shows as well. But man, we thank you for tuning in. Will Menace, my name is Bryce Koon. Make sure you check out the podcast on all those platforms. Tomorrow night for the Georgia Tech fans, we're going to be talking centered around the wide receiver position, and then we're going to be back Wednesday talking ACC and some of the trap games. I don't know if I'm going to be able to physically or mentally make it through every single program, but we will talk about some of the big games, and Georgia State probably will be mentioned in that, and it'll be a complete uproar from everyone there. But it'll be interesting. It'll be a lot of fun to talk to. Maybe Ralph will join us too. Will Menace, my name is Bryce Koon. We'll catch you next time here on the Crowded Booth. Make sure you hit that sub button, subscribe, hit the notifications so you know when we go live next time. We'll see you later.
Pile in here and make yourself feel at home. The Crowded Booth is coming on. The Crowded Booth with Bryce Koon.